to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, appealing that federal judge's ruling that stayed the president's executive order banning travel to the United States from 7 Muslim-majority nations. Betsy Woodruff is with me. She's a political reporter at the Daily Beast. Also with me, Lonnie Chen, a CNN political commentator and a former aide to Mitt Romney. Thank you both for being here. Just your reaction, Betsy, to this news. I mean, now it's taken to the Ninth Circuit. How do you see this playing out?
Remains to be seen. Of course, I think what's really important to remember with all this is that the last 24 hours have been uniquely chaotic for folks still trying to travel to the United States. And what the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decides to do with this will have a very real impact on people who may be in the air on their way here. I spoke this morning with Hassan Ahmed, who's an immigration attorney. He works in Northern Virginia, and he's been advising his clients as of this morning to get on planes as quickly as possible if they're from one of the 7 countries that had travel banned to the United States. So there are folks from these countries who are on their way here, who are hoping to get a last shot at being reunited with their families. And as this legal battle plays out, there's sort of a parallel high level of tension as these folks are hoping to get here before any judge ruling could reverse the reversal of the president's executive order.
And Lonnie, let me read you something that the president tweeted tonight. What is our country coming to when a judge can halt a Homeland Security travel ban and anyone, even with bad intentions, can come to the United States? That is the system that exists in the United States. I mean, that is why we have separate and equal branches of government. Does that show to you a fundamental misunderstanding of the judiciary branch and their powers by the president?
You know, Poppy, I don't know if it's a misunderstanding. I think the president is communicating directly to his supporters to say, look, this is the way I feel. But I mean, he's saying, Lonnie, he's saying, what does this say about our country that our legal system can do what our legal system is legally allowed to do? I totally understand that. I think the legal system certainly is the place where this is going to be determined, and it should be determined. But my point is simply that I think he is communicating directly to his supporters so they understand where he's coming from. Now, obviously, people look at that and say, well, the courts are doing their job. The courts are considering this case now. But I think what the president's trying to do is he is trying to do, this has always been part of the Donald Trump strategy, Poppy. It's been to communicate directly to his supporters, things that may make some of us scratch our heads. This is his way of communicating directly to the people who supported him during the campaign to say, look, I am going to continue this fight.
One of the other things he tweeted, apparently an effort to delegitimize this Washington state federal judge, by the way, an appointee of President George W. Bush. He said the opinion of the so-called judge, which essentially takes law enforcement away from our country, is ridiculous and will be overturned. We'll see what the courts decide, but here's how the Vice President, Mike Pence, responded to George Stephanopoulos asking him about the president's use of the term so-called judge. Listen.
How is he a so-called judge?
Well, again, we face a dangerous enemy, inspiring people to come into this country, and frankly, inspiring people who are already in this country. And the president is determined to use the authority that he has under the Constitution and under the law. But we'll work through the courts to challenge them.
But doesn't this judge have the authority to do what he did as well?
He certainly does, and that's why the administration is complying with that order as we speak. And we'll go through the process in the courts to get a stay of that order so that, again, we can implement this action that is entirely focused on the safety and security of the American people. Look, we've got to do things differently.
Betsy, what do you make of that? I mean, Mike Pence is standing by the president in terms of his language I don't think that the vice president would necessarily use to describe a federal judge. What do you make of it?
There probably isn't an odder couple in American politics right now than Donald Trump and Mike Pence. There aren't two men who are more dispositionally and rhetorically different. Of course, Pence's comment defending the fact that Trump referred to this judge as so-called by pointing to the reality that there is terrorism and that terrorist groups do try to hurt Americans is a bit of a non sequitur. The fact that ISIS exists doesn't mean that the federal judiciary doesn't exist. It's not an answer to the question. And of course, at the end of the day, we have to know, where does the president come down on this very simple question of compliance with these court orders? And thus far, DHS is complying. That's certainly an indicator that the system is working. But when the president talks about the federal judiciary in sort of scare quotes, it's something that absolutely gives a lot of activists pause.
On another other note, we just got some clips of the interview that the president sat down with Bill O'Reilly of Fox News to do that will air, I believe, in its entirety tomorrow during the Super Bowl. Here's one part that stood out. Oh, unfortunately, we don't have that. We're going to get that for you a little bit later in the show. But Lonnie, one of your points on back to this breaking news is the fact that you said, all right, the travel ban, the temporary travel ban put forth by the White House needed to be rolled out differently. You believe the intent was, you know, obviously almost half of America agrees with it, but you say it was a botched rollout that has ultimately cost them. Explain.
Well, I think, again, you know, if they had written an executive order that maybe was a little bit tighter, that maybe had buy-in from other leaders, for example, the Secretary of Homeland Security or other people who are usually part of what we call an interagency process, I think that it would have been more defensible in the court of public opinion. Now, obviously, the legal system is going to play this through how the legal system will play it, but the public response, I think, is in part, Poppy, a response to the fact that the process through which the executive order was issued was not usually the kind of process you would see for this sort of order.
All right, we now have the sound of the president's interview with Fox News. Let's listen.
Do you respect Putin?
I do respect him.
Do you? Why?
Well, I respect a lot of people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get along with him. He's a leader of his country. I say it's better to get along with Russia than not. And if Russia helps us in the fight against ISIS, which is a major fight, and Islamic terrorism all over the world,
right,
major fight, that's a good thing. Will I get along with him? I have no idea. It's
He's
very
a killer,
I
though.
won't.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
Betsy, how do you read that? I mean, do you read that as him putting the United States and Putin's Russia on equal footing?
Without a doubt. I think that's the only reasonable understanding of the last couple of seconds of that clip. And that's something that's going to be deeply disturbing to many folks, but particularly to hawkish Republicans in Congress who've spent years and years and political capital arguing that Vladimir Putin is a uniquely troubling, uniquely dangerous member of the international community. Folks like Marco Rubio and John McCain have worked overtime to characterize Putin as a thug, as somebody who the United States should not be treating as admirable or as someone who even is on the same level with us remotely on the human rights question. The fact that Trump suggested that the United States foreign policy, that the human rights situation in the U.S. is comparable or similar to that in Russia is something that's going to generate a massive amount of criticism for him over the coming days and weeks.
Betsy Woodruff, Lonnie Chen, thank you both as we continue to watch these live pictures of these protests. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we head to the heart of the part of America that got this president elected. We're going to take you to Beattyville, Kentucky, where more than 80% of the folks there voted for President Trump. Can this president win the war on poverty that was launched more than 50 years ago, not far from here?
Do you think most